Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third lecture on our legislative branch. In this one, we're going to take a look at the Senate, how it's organized, its leadership, and what it actually does, and so forth. So let's get started. So when we last talked about the House of Representatives, it's a very chaotic body. It's much bigger than the Senate. But the Senate is a little bit more informal, a little bit more flexible for a variety of reasons. One, it's a smaller group that you're working with, only 100 members, and it's very deliberate. So it deals with a lot of different issues. It takes its time. So therefore, since it's taking its time, they can be a little bit more flexible in the rules that they're using because they need to be able to freely express their ideas because you're talking about things in a little bit more detail, and so forth. And when I mean deliberate, it can take weeks or months to actually get things done at certain stages just because of what they're doing and what they're dealing with. So the vice president, I know this is an older picture, and it's not Mike Pence, who is our current one. This is Joe Biden. I forgot to change the picture, but one of the roles of the vice president as part of our checks and balances and separation of powers is that we have a link between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and the vice president provides that link in a direct way. He's the president of the Senate. Now, the vice president pretty much does two things in his role as president of the Senate. He only votes if there's a tie because it's an even numbered body with 100 total members. So the vice president will step in if there's a tie. And then pretty much just kind of runs things through, organizes it, and recognizes members, recognizes what they're talking about, and puts up questions to a vote. Those are the two main roles that the vice president plays within his role as president of the Senate. They're not supposed to debate, but they can go and persuade people in terms of personal contact, either in the Senate or more typically outside of it. And that's pretty much it, because most of the time the vice president's going to be spending their days working in the executive branch with their duties as the vice president. Now, when the vice president isn't there, you have a replacement, and that's the president pro tem. And the president pro tem is elected by the Senate from the majority and is usually the most senior member. Not always, but usually they try to pick the most senior member based on experience. Floor leaders, you have majority and minority leaders in the Senate, and they're the most important officers in the Senate on an everyday basis. The majority leader, who currently is Mitch McConnell, the man down there in the lower right-hand corner, they move their party's bills through. And just like the Speaker of the House and the majority leader in the House of Representatives, they work to plan and schedule the agenda of the Senate. Now, they work a little bit more closely here with the minority leader, and so forth. Excuse me. And then they make sure that members attend, again, for the same reason we saw in the House, so that people vote and show up. The minority leader does a lot of the same things. One of the things that's different in terms of their job is they try to develop criticisms or platforms against the majority party's position if they're in disagreement with it. It's not necessarily for the fact of trying to create chaos, although in some cases, more recently, you can argue that that's the case. It's more about trying to present their platform and present their issues as kind of a give and take on the arguments of what are being put forth. And then the whips, just like they are in the House of Representatives, where they're there to kind of help organize things, take the temperature of what people in the party or other members of the House of Representatives or the Senate are trying to do, the whips do the same thing here. Okay, so in terms of how they schedule work, any member in the Senate, doesn't matter if you're brand new or you're the oldest person there, most tenured person there, you can propose a bill. The procedure in the Senate is much more informal than it is in the House, for the sole fact that it's much smaller. The floor leaders themselves, the majority and minority, control that. You only have two set calendars. You have the calendar of general orders, which is set up for all bills that are being considered that do not regard themselves with the executive branch. And then the other calendar, which is pretty much everything they have. And then the other calendar is anything that are actions done by the executive branch, such as treaties with other countries or nominations to positions such as the Supreme Court, cabinet members, military officers, and so forth. Now, typically how they bring bills to the floor is by unanimous consent. Everybody says, hey, look, let's bring it in, let's talk about it, let's debate it, and so forth. Now, politically, we know our system is primarily a two-party system, and just like in the House of Representatives, you have the Republicans on the right and the Democrats on the left. And you can kind of see this, or you can see this in the picture on the lower right-hand corner, with the Republicans in red on the right, the Democrats in blue on the left. Now, those two lighter blue circles, if you guys ever take a chance to look at kind of a senatorial layout like this, those are two independents and or third-party candidates that lean to a specific party. If they're colored light blue, in this case, these two are leaning towards the Democrats. If they were colored light red, they'd be leaning towards the Republicans. You might even see them without a lean, and typically you're either going to see that color as yellow or green for independent. Now, a filibuster is something that is used quite often, or more recently has been used quite often in the Senate. And basically what you have in the Senate is there's unlimited time for debate on bills. And this is one of the reasons why the Senate is much more deliberate than the House of Representatives. It takes longer for things to get through. But typically this unlimited debate does allow a pathway for things to get defeated. And that's why it's so important to have a more of a majority control in the Senate, is because of this unlimited debate time. Now, a filibuster is a stalling process to prevent a vote, and it can be done through a number of members. But typically, essentially, all a filibuster is where you talk continuously. And it can be about anything. It does not have to be about what's at hand. There's been examples or stories that people in the Senate have have read out of a phone book, or taken a sports almanac and read baseball box scores to pass up time. And what this does is it not only delays the votes, but it can also delay committees and delay actions in lower parts before they actually even get to the vote itself. And filibusters can go on for days, weeks, or even months in some cases. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be the same person talking each time. It might pass from one member of that party to the next, but they can do this. Now, since this has been more prevalent in these years, as you can see in the graph at the bottom, where we've had cloture motions in the last, you can see in the last 30, 40 years, filed clotures and agreed to clotures, which we'll get to what they are in a moment, have risen, is because we've seen more filibusters. And that's typically because we've had more division in our political system here, where Republicans and Democrats are going against each other, and for really, in a lot of cases, the simple reason of not agreeing on stuff just because of the political party difference. But cloture votes are a vote that actually is a vote to help stop filibusters. Now, it doesn't stop it completely, it just limits it to only 1 hour for each debate, which can kind of significantly slow that process down in terms of filibusters and try to help move things forward. So that's kind of how that system's put in place. If you guys want a really good example of a filibuster, it's one that we would watch in class. Just go to YouTube and type in Parks and Rec filibuster, and have a go at that one. It's a really hilarious, really nerdy filibuster example on that TV show by Patton Oswalt, where he's filibustering using his theories about Star Wars and a lot of the comic book world universe. It's fantastic. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this lecture about the Senate and how it works, as well as the last one about the House of Representatives. And I will see you guys next time. Take it easy.